Hi, and welcome to Cloud Compliance and Assurance. My name is Andres Silva. I'm a Principal Specialist Solutions Architect with the Cloud Management Services team here at AWS. And I'm very excited to talk to you today about Cloud Compliance and Assurance, a very important topic for our customers. All customers that are running workloads in AWS or are migrating workloads to AWS quickly realize the importance of compliance and making sure that they're addressing that important requirement for their organization. So the purpose of this presentation today is to help you understand how you can use the different services we provide to ensure that you're meeting your compliance requirements. This is not going to be a presentation about a specific product and its features. It's going to be a presentation that is going to help you understand how the different pieces we offer fit together, how you can use them to simplify your journey to compliance in the cloud. Here's the agenda of the items we're going to cover in this presentation. We're going to first talk about some of the challenges that our customers are facing today. You may feel yourself identify with some of those. Then we're going to talk about some common themes that we're seeing with our customers related to compliance. And then we're going to jump into our discussion to help you understand, like I said before, how these services enable you to achieve compliance in the cloud. We're going to give you a very easy way of understanding how all these pieces fit together and how you can take advantage of all these services to ensure you're meeting your requirements around compliance. And then at the end, we're going to cover some key takeaways, things you can do to continue learning about these services, to continue learning about compliance in the cloud. So let's get right to it. First, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges our customers are facing. Now, we're not going to cover all the points that you see here. You may find yourself identified with some of the things you see here. I do want to touch on a couple of them that are very common. For example, volume, variety, and velocity of the resources in the cloud. Many of our customers realize quickly that the speed and scale at which resources operate in the cloud makes it impossible to use some of the traditional mechanisms that have been used for compliance tracking, like spreadsheets or databases. Also, the fact that the pace of innovation is another thing. New services are coming up, and we need to ensure we're meeting compliance around those also. Also, another important point is the different compliance and security needs our customers have. The requirements for a financial services institution may be very different from the requirements and compliance regulations that healthcare customer may need to meet. So all these are challenges our customers are trying to address, and hopefully through this presentation, we'll help you see how you can tackle those. We did a survey talking about common themes that we see when we talk to our customers, and we found some interesting data. 80% of the respondents to that survey mentioned that they're still doing cloud compliance the old-fashioned way, the manual way, and it makes it very difficult when you are handling or managing cloud infrastructure. We mentioned that before about the scale, velocity of cloud resources. 60% of our customers in that survey said that they're spending a lot of time to collect the evidence that is required for auditing. We're going to talk about how we can simplify that later on. And although we don't have a specific percent for the last bullet point, it's also a common theme we hear with our customers. They want to use a cloud-native way to address compliance. So we have a number of services that can help you in that journey, and we're going to talk about those. But first, here's another challenge you may feel identified with when we talk about compliance. Which one do I use for compliance? We have such a wide range of services and capabilities in AWS that you may feel a little bit overwhelmed or may need some guidance. You may ask yourself, which one do I use first? Should I pick Security Hub? Should I go with Config? How about GuardDuty? Well, what does System Manager do for me in the compliance story? Customers sometimes need some help and guidance to understand how all these pieces fit together. Well, today I'm going to share with you something that makes all this very, very simple. And it's based on a well-known auditing guidance provided by the Institute of Internal Audit. And it's called the 3 Lines of Defense. This is a well-known standard that is used in the industry to help organizations that are managing governance, risk, and compliance implement an efficient framework to do that. And the way it works is that every organization should implement these 3 lines of defense. The first line of defense is implementing functions that manage risk. These are the services, operations that day-to-day allow you to detect any risk that could arise in your infrastructure and address it in an efficient way. In the second line of defense, you have services that oversee risk for your entire organization and give you a single pane of glass of where you are in terms of compliance, and also give you the ability of addressing non-compliant resources at scale and get them handled promptly. And then the third line of defense is where you have functions that provide assurance of risk. This is also a very important element, because at some point after you implement all your controls for compliance, you're going to get a visit from an auditor that's going to say, okay, prove to me that you are indeed doing all these things. And that's the third line of defense. And as you can see, we have mapped in this slide where each one of these services fit in that story. In the first line of defense, managing risk, you have services like Config, you have CloudTrail, you have Systems Manager, you have Control Tower. All these services help you with the day-to-day activities of managing risk and detecting any non-compliant resources, addressing them quickly. Then on the second line of defense is where you have services like Security Hub, CloudWatch even, that give you the ability of overseeing your security posture across your entire organization. And now in that third line of defense, we have a service that we just released in reInvent 2020, Audit Manager. Audit Manager helps you with that third line of providing assurance of risk, providing the evidence that you need to provide to auditors. And we'll dive deep into each one of them. Let's talk about managing risk, and let's talk about some of these services. And as we go through them, you will see how you can combine these services to make an effective, or to implement an effective mechanism for compliance. And then we'll move up the different lines of defense and give you a quick overview of how the other services tie in together to the story. Talking about managing risk, the first service and one of the core elements of managing risk is AWS Config. As we progress in our consideration of the different lines of defense and the different services, you see how many times Config is at the core of everything you do related to detecting non-compliant resources and managing risk. Now, what is AWS Config? Quickly, for those who are not familiar with it, AWS Config is a service that enables you to assess, evaluate the configuration state of your resources automatically. Once you turn it on, every time a new resource is created, every time a resource is modified, we take a picture in time of that resource with all the elements of its configuration. Whenever it's changed, we take another picture in time. We not only track the properties of that resource, but also the relationships of that resources with other resources that might have been affected by the change. You can keep that data for up to 7 years, and that in itself is a very powerful element for you to understand where you're at in terms of compliance at any given point in time, because you can go back in history and see how was this security group configured 1 month ago? What instances were using this security group? How was my S3 bucket configured? Those are all important elements of security and compliance. But add to that the power of config rules. AWS config rules allow you to evaluate the state of a resource against a predefined state for compliance reasons. And this is how you can define your controls for compliance. We provide our customers with a rich set of managed rules for compliance that evaluate most of the common scenarios they're interested in. But you have the option also of extending the power of config rules by using custom rules, which are powered by AWS Lambda, and essentially allow you to validate anything you want, anything you can put in code in a Lambda function. This is a very powerful element also of addressing non-compliant resources at scale. I want to touch on a couple of additional important features related to config. As you can see, there are 3 main elements to AWS config: the record, the evaluate, and the visualize. In the record, we already explained the resource tracking capabilities. On the evaluate, in addition to the config rules, there's an important element, which is remediation actions. Remediation actions allow you to automatically fix a non-compliant resource as soon as it's detected. Imagine that you want to make sure that at all times, no S3 bucket that is created in your account is publicly accessible. It's a very common use case for our customers. You can deploy a rule that detects that, and you can also deploy automatically a remediation action that as soon as it detects that somebody maybe accidentally created a bucket with S3 with public access, it'll fix it immediately for you. This is a very powerful element in simplifying compliance at scale. The other thing that's important to mention in the evaluate part is conformance packs. What conformance packs does is it allows you to group a number of config rules and remediation actions and into a single entity that can be deployed across your entire organization. That simplifies the process of grouping the controls that you need to deploy and deploying them at scale. We provide a number of samples related to operational best practices and even some compliance frameworks. And of course, like I said, you can tie in those also with remediation actions to further simplify the process. Aggregators allows you to collect all the data that your conformance packs or your deployed rules are collecting, and even the resource tracking data, and put it into a single place and then report and even visualize some of that data that is produced by AWS Config. So as you can see, there's a lot of powerful elements to implement those detective controls for compliance purposes. Now, when we talk about managing risk, we also have to talk about CloudTrail. CloudTrail is our managed audit trail platform in AWS, and many of our customers are well aware of how it works, but it tracks every single action that is performed on an AWS account, from a user logging in through the console to an API call or a command that is executing via the command line. You get not only the who, but the when and what they did. This is super important because as config is going to tell you that something went out of compliance, CloudTrail is going to tell you when and how it happened and who did it. This is super important when you're investigating compliance issues. There's also a couple of other important features that I want to call out about CloudTrail that are important to the compliance story. That is data events. What data events allows you to do is to track very granular actions within a service. For example, for S3, many organizations would like to address data exfiltration risk. And what you can do is enable data events to track every operation in a single bucket. Who read the file, who wrote the file or deleted a file. All that data is collected, sent to a secure S3 bucket, and in the event of an incident, you can query that data to get all the details about that operation. Data events is currently supported for S3 and Lambda also. So as you can see, CloudTrail is another very powerful element. And when you use it in combination with CloudTrail, it enhances your capabilities around compliance. But when we talk about compliance, we also need to, and managing risk in compliance, we also need to talk about Systems Manager, another important player for the compliance story. Systems Manager it's a very powerful tool that allows you to group resources, visualize them, take automated actions in those resources. But what does it have to do with compliance? Well, there are a couple of elements that are very important with Systems Manager. One of them is Systems Manager Automation. Systems Manager Automation is a feature that allows you to design automated workflows that interact with the AWS platform. This is the tool that you can use to create remediation actions that you can use with config rules to fix non-compliant resources. It's very easy to do. You can design these automated actions in the console by using a graphical interface, or if you prefer, you can use a DSL that we provide in YAML format. So that is a very powerful element to fix your non-compliant resources. In addition to that, Systems Manager provides Run Command, Inventory, and Patch Manager, which are additional important elements of managing risk at scale, because these tools allow you to extend the power of compliance all the way down to an EC2 instance, where you can run configuration management tools, set the state of that EC2 instance to either compliant or non-compliant based on the execution of a configuration management tool, collect inventory that allows you to validate that your instances have the appropriate software installed, and also use Patch Manager to make sure that your instances are up to date with important security patches. All that information is rolled up into config, and you can define in config rules that validate that all the way down to the EC2 instance level. So as you can see, by combining Systems Manager with config, you can enhance your capabilities of managing risk. But what about data? Data is an important part of the story related to compliance. Well, when we talk about data, we need to talk about services like AWS Backup and others that we have like Cloud Endure. AWS Backup simplifies the process of making sure that you have a good strategy for protecting your data. And what happens is, once you implement that, the data, or you can validate with config that you indeed have those policies established to protect your data. So you can see there's a tight connection there between AWS config and backup for data protection purposes. So these are some of the services that you can use to manage risk day to day. And by combining them, as you can see, it becomes a very, very powerful story. Now let's talk briefly about overseeing risk, another important element. Overseeing risk, as we said, is the second line of defense. And in this line of defense, what you do is you make sure you have a mechanism to validate that the managed risk elements are in place and that you are collecting data and have visibility to it across your entire organization. That's where services like Security Hub come in. Security Hub aggregates data from a lot of multiple sources. Config, GuardDuty, Macie, Inspector, Firewall Manager, as you can see there, IAM Access Analyzer, and even from partners, data that's produced by partner solutions. All that data can be collected. You can use some of the standards that are predefined for Security Hub, for PCI DSS, or CIS, or some others. We continue to expand the capabilities of Security Hub to more standards. And then what you can do is define what things you want to keep track of in terms of security or oversee for your entire organization. Security Hub makes it easy to not only find insights on the results of those evaluations, but also to take actions. And from Security Hub, you can even remediate non-compliant resources. So it is very important when we talk about that second line of defense that we understand very well how Security Hub works and how it comes into play into the compliance story. When we talk about overseeing risk, we also need to talk about CloudWatch. CloudWatch is our metrics and logs platform, and it's an observability platform is the correct name for it. And it allows you to collect monitoring and operational data in the form of logs, in the forms of metrics, events, collected and aggregated into a single place, create alarms, create dashboards that show you the important operational metrics that you need to track. So again, you can oversee your security posture and operational posture to effectively manage all the risk that we define in the first line of defense. So this is another important element that we should be familiar with. Now, let's talk about the third line of defense. And in the third line of defense, we have functions that provide assurance of risk management, right? So what this means is after you have implemented your managed risk, after you have implemented your overseeing of risk, you're going to have to prove to an auditor, hey, show me that you are really doing those things. Now, the challenge with this traditionally has been to collect all that information, to collect that evidence. And even when you have automated systems managing risk with Config and Security Hub, at the end of the day, you're going to have to prepare all that data so that you can present it in a PDF format, in a document format to your auditors. This is where Audit Manager comes in. Audit Manager helps you to continuously audit your AWS resources and simplifies the process of assessing risk and meeting regulatory compliance requirements. How does it do that? Well, with Audit Manager, you can create an assessment based on some of the most popular compliance frameworks. We support a good set of those and we continue to expand them. You can customize them and add your own checks to it. But basically what happens is when you deploy them, they're continuously gathering the data that you need for compliance purposes. So because it's constantly running, constantly collecting that data, you can, at the click of a button, immediately when an auditor asks for that information, produce the reports that are required for your audit. So as you can see, that completes the story related to the three lines of defense. Now you can provide, you can manage your risk, you can oversee it, and at the end, you have an easy way of collecting that data, which is one of the biggest challenges, and providing evidence that you are indeed meeting your compliance requirements. So the key here, as you can see, is to understand where each one of these services fit, how they connect to each other, how you can put them together to effectively manage risk at scale. Now, to help you understand how this works, we have a demo that we want to show you where we are going to use a combination of services to manage risk, we're going to use CloudTrail data events and CloudWatch logs. And through this demo, you can see how using a combination of these two services simplifies the story around managing risk. Let's take a look at the demo. In this demo, we'll show you some of the features of CloudTrail and CloudWatch that you can use to manage risk at scale. Now, many of the most used compliance frameworks include controls to manage the risk associated with data exfiltration. For example, PCI DSS, NIST, and FedRAMP all require you to monitor and control access to files stored on S3 to detect any anomalous activity. You can accomplish this by using CloudTrail data events. Let's demonstrate how you can set up a data events trail to track all access to an S3 bucket. Later, we'll show you how you can use CloudWatch logs to search and filter all the activity produced by CloudTrail data events. To create a CloudTrail data events trail, we can go to the CloudTrail console and click Create a Trail. We need to enter a name. Let's call this trail CCA Demo Events. We're going to go ahead and select Create a new S3 bucket. The console will auto-populate a name for me. Let's make sure that KMS encryption is enabled, and we'll give the KMS alias a name. Let's call it CCA Demo. We make sure log file validation is enabled, and we're going to go ahead and enable CloudWatch logs. What this is going to do is send the data produced by CloudTrail data events to a CloudWatch logs group. This will help with searching the logs and getting insights from it, as we'll demonstrate later in this demo. Let's make sure we have a new log group, and let's give it a name. Let's give a name to the IAM role that will be used, CCA Demo. We're going to click Next. We're going to uncheck management events, and we're going to check data events because that's what we're interested in tracking on this trail. We make sure S3 is selected. We want to uncheck all S3 buckets because we're interested in tracking a specific bucket for this demo. Is this CCA Demo CloudTrail bucket. But of course, you can always enable it for all buckets that are currently on the account and all future buckets also. Let's click Next and review all the information and click Create. My trail has been created, CCA Demo Events, and it's logging. Now, after I have created my CloudTrail data events to track everything that happens on that S3 bucket, let's say that I need to investigate a file that was deleted on that bucket. I need to find out what happened. It's a sensitive file. Let's go find out using CloudWatch logs. To do that, let's go to the CloudWatch console. Let's click on Log Groups and locate the the log group that was created for this specific data events trail. This is it. So let's click on this log stream right here. And here I have all the data that is being sent from CloudTrail data events. Let's look for a delete object event in that log group. And immediately I get some information here about the API calls to delete object that was done on that S3 bucket. I can see here that at this specific time here, there was a file that was deleted. The name of the file was readme.md. And who did it? I have the information of the person that actually did it. So this is in it, as you can see, very powerful to track any sensitive operations that were done on your file. A couple of other things that I wanted to call out that you can do with CloudWatch logs in relation to CloudTrail is that you can take advantage of log insights. So with log insights, what you can do is you can run very specific queries that track specific operations, specific actions that were created by CloudTrail data events. We provide some sample queries that you can use to learn how the system works. But let's go ahead and run a query that tracks all the delete object events and gives me back, as you can see, the bucket name, the file name, and who did it, right? So let's go ahead and run that query. And as you can see here in the results, we quickly find that there has been a number of events with the delete object, and I get the information that I ask, the bucket name, the name of the file that was deleted, and who did it. Right? So this is very powerful information for my investigation of what happened to that file. With the results of this query, you can add them to a dashboard so you can constantly track what's happening in that specific bucket. You can create an alarm that can page somebody if a file is modified or deleted. So as you can see, these are very powerful tools to allow you to handle any risk associated with data exfiltration. This is a key component of compliance at scale, and by combining the power of CloudTrail data events with CloudWatch Logs Group, this greatly simplifies the process of you having all the information you need to track any anomalous activity. So, what do we want you to take away from this presentation? Well, there's 3 important points that we want you to remember as we consider all these great features and the 3 lines of defense. Number 1 is the 3 lines of defense. It is important to understand how they work, what services are mapped to each line of defense. Typically, what's going to happen as you start your journey with compliance is that you're going to start implementing your managed risk controls, right? And that's very common. And as you implement those and take advantage of multiple services, then you can move to the second line of defense where you're overseeing risk. Now, there's nothing wrong with starting with Security Hub. Some customers do that, but they quickly realize that they need to complete the story with some individual services to manage risk to augment the capabilities of Security Hub. And then the third line of defense, which is Audit Manager, so that you're prepared to provide evidence of your audits at any given time. Number 2 thing that we want you to take away from this presentation is how important data protection is. We talked briefly about AWS Backup, Cloud Endure, and how Config can help you validate that you indeed have in place the requirements related to compliance. This is an important part of compliance, and we want you to keep that in mind as you leverage the different services to assess compliance. And number 3, hopefully through this presentation, we've shown you the art of the possible. No, compliance is not the same for all of our customers. Each one have their own unique requirements, but by understanding how these different services map, how you can use them together, you can see what the art of the possible is, and how you can combine them to do 2 fundamental things that are related to compliance, and that is simplify and automate as much as possible. So what are the next steps? Well, we want you to dive deep into each one of these services. Now that you have a good overview of how they tie to the compliance story, try to learn more about them. Try to get the details of how Systems Manager works, how Config works, Audit Manager, Security Hub. Become an expert on them so that you can understand better what features of each one you can use. Number 2 is browse the blog. We have a lot of blogs and resources that can help you and walk you through the process of doing a POC for each one of these services. Do that. Search them. There's a lot of resources available for that. And number 3, talk to your account team. They can help. Your AWS account team can access resources that we have here at AWS to further help you. They can engage our team if you need an expert engagement or a team of experts that we have related to compliance within the organization. We'll be happy to help with that. It is very important that you talk to your account team. And last, we want to remind you all the great resources we have for training and certification. We have digital training, classroom training, certification, many, many resources. If you would like more information about that, go to aws.com/training. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. We hope that the information we share can help you understand better how to navigate your journey through compliance. And please don't forget to complete the session survey. Thank you.